Hollywood has always celebrated legends, but every so often, a story emerges that feels less like a chapter in a career and more like a tremor in the heart of an entire industry. Heath Ledger's legacy is one of those stories, a legacy that gleams with brilliance, whispers with regret, and ends in a silence so heavy that even the brightest lights on Sunset Boulevard seemed to dim the night he was gone. Heath Ledger wasn't just a gifted actor. He was a force, raw, unpredictable, magnetic. The kind of talent that didn't ask for a stage, it claimed it. From a teenage dreamer in Perth to one of the most revered performers of his generation, he built a career that many spend decades chasing. And yet, behind the applause, behind the billion-dollar box office numbers, behind the unforgettable roar of his Joker, there existed a quieter truth. The weight of what he carried and what he left behind was far heavier than the world ever realized. Heath's estate, millions in earnings, royalties that still rise each year, properties, investments, artistic archives, and the creative empire he never had time to finish, became a symbol Hollywood didn't quite know how to talk about. His sudden absence froze everything. Scripts he was meant to lead were shelved. Directors spoke in half sentences. His daughter became the center of a legacy he never planned this way, and the world was left with a question that has echoed for more than a decade. How can someone so young, so alive, so unforgettably brilliant leave behind a fortune that feels less like wealth and more like a wound? The night Heath Ledger passed, Hollywood didn't just lose an actor. It lost a spark, one that still flickers in the quiet places where talent meets tragedy, and in that silence, his legacy began. Heath Ledger entered the world far from the glitter and noise of Hollywood. Born on April 4th, 1979 in Perth, Western Australia, he grew up in a place where the sun burned hot, the streets were quiet, and dreams were often treated like fragile things, beautiful but unlikely to survive the long road to reality. His childhood home wasn't wealthy, nor was it broken. It was simply ordinary. And sometimes, for a soul like Heath's, ordinary felt too small. He was a boy who moved as if he were already running towards something. Schoolyard performances, improvised characters, afternoons spent sketching, dancing, imagining entire worlds inside his head. When his parents separated, something inside him shifted. The house felt different. The silence felt heavier. And he learned earlier than most that even the people we love can drift away without warning. That understanding carved a small hollow in him, a hollow he would later fill with art, devotion, and an almost desperate need to create something that could not be taken from him. At 10 years old, he found a script at school. His class was putting on a small play, nothing more than a child's activity. But the moment he stepped on stage, even in that crowded classroom with paper props and uneven lighting, something awakened. He didn't just perform, he transformed. Teachers noticed, friends stared, and Heath, for the first time in his young life, felt the world open in front of him. Then came the moment that marked his true beginning. His older sister Kate, the one he admired, the one whose approval meant everything, handed him a path he didn't know he was ready for. She introduced him to acting as a craft, not just as pretend, but as a discipline, a language, a calling. Her influence was a steady hand behind the spark that had been flickering inside him since childhood. Heath Ledger made a quiet promise to himself in those early years, a promise shaped by loneliness, imagination, and the hunger to build something lasting. He would never live a life that could be forgotten, and that promise, whispered in a small bedroom in Perth, became the first stone in the legacy he would one day leave behind. Heath Ledger's rise did not begin with applause. It began with a decision, reckless, brave, and utterly irreversible. At 17, with a backpack, a few dollars, and a certainty that frightened even him, he left Perth behind. He left the familiar streets, the warmth of his mother's kitchen, the comforting presence of his sister. He chose uncertainty over safety because something inside him whispered that staying meant shrinking. And shrinking was something Heath Ledger simply could not do. Sydney was loud, unforgiving, impatient, but it was also alive, and he stepped into that chaos with the hunger of someone who believed fate was not a matter of chance, but of motion. He worked small gigs, commercials, extra roles. He slept in cheap apartments, rode buses until midnight, auditioned for anything, everything. And even when doors closed, even when casting directors dismissed him with polite nods, he didn't break. Every rejection was fuel, every setback a quiet vow. Then it happened. A small role, then a bigger one, and suddenly the young man from Perth was no longer invisible. His presence on screen, restless, unpredictable, electric, pulled attention the way storms pull light. Hollywood noticed. Offers followed. And in 1999, 10 Things I Hate About You became the spark that changed the trajectory of his life. One song on the bleachers, one mischievous smile, one moment of pure cinematic charm, and Heath Ledger was no longer just an actor. He was a phenomenon. But he refused to be boxed into the heartthrob archetype that Hollywood tried to carve around him. He needed more, needed depth, needed challenge, needed something that frightened him enough to feel alive. So he turned down roles others would have killed for. He chased risk instead of comfort, complexity instead of fame. His empire began quietly, almost unintentionally. Real estate investments, art collections, creative collaborations, small production ventures. Heath was young, but he thought like someone who understood the fragility of life, someone who wanted to build something enduring, something that would not evaporate when the camera stopped. Then came Brokeback Mountain. Heath Ledger didn't just act in that film, he bled into it. The performance was raw, haunting, unforgettable. He spoke little, but said everything. Critics didn't just praise him, they bowed to the magnitude of what he had done. Awards followed. Respect deepened. Hollywood realized it wasn't witnessing a rising star. It was witnessing a once-in-a-generation artist. With fame came wealth, millions from films, millions more from future royalties. A home in Los Angeles, a place in New York where he found a different kind of quiet. Projects lined up, scripts flooded in, and yet beneath the success, beneath the empire he was building brick by brick, there was something harder to see. The exhaustion of a man who gave too much of himself to every character he touched. Because Heath Ledger didn't merely perform, he inhabited. And with each transformation, something stayed behind, like fragments of himself left scattered across the roles he embodied. The world saw triumph, but inside, a quieter battle was beginning, one that success could not silence. You could almost feel the storm forming, softly, silently, behind the glow of his greatest achievements. He had everything, yet lost what mattered most. By the time Heath Ledger reached the height of his brilliance, there was a quiet tremor beneath the surface of his success. Hollywood saw the magazine covers, the interviews, the awards, the breathtaking performances. But behind closed doors in dim rooms lit only by the flicker of late-night lamps, Heath was wrestling with shadows no audience could ever see. The same gift that elevated him was also the force that consumed him. Heath didn't slip into characters. He surrendered to them. Each role demanded a piece of him, and he gave it willingly. But when his life intersected with the Joker in The Dark Knight, that surrender became something far more dangerous. The preparation, months of isolation, sleepless nights, notebooks filled with chaotic handwriting, pulled him into a psychological space that was brilliant on screen, but brutal in reality. He once admitted that playing the Joker triggered insomnia he couldn't escape. Nights stretched into dawn, thoughts tangled, silence grew heavier. And while Hollywood celebrated the genius, Heath struggled to hold on to the simple things: rest, balance, peace. His relationship with Michelle Williams, the woman he loved, the mother of his daughter Matilda, began to fracture under the weight of schedules, exhaustion, and emotional turbulence. They tried, they cared, they loved deeply. But sometimes love is not enough against the pressure of fame and the burden of inner storms. When they separated, something in Heath dimmed. The small family he cherished became a memory he could no longer hold intact. Then came the pills, prescribed, necessary, but dangerously relied upon to quiet the mind that refused to rest. Painkillers for old injuries, medication for anxiety, something to sleep, something to wake, something to steady the rhythm that fame had thrown off balance. It was not addiction. It was not recklessness. It was exhaustion. Pure, relentless exhaustion. Friends noticed. Directors whispered concern. His father remembered telling him to slow down. But Heath Ledger wasn't wired for halfway. He didn't know how to dim the intensity that made him extraordinary. The night he passed, an unfinished script lay open in his room. A few notes in the margins, plans he hadn't shared yet. And just hours earlier, he spoke to his sister Kate, who urged him to be careful with the mix of medications he was taking. His response, gentle, reassuring, still haunts the family today. All the homes he built could not shelter him from the storms within. Hollywood froze. Directors fell silent. Fellow actors cried in interviews, unable to finish their sentences. Michelle Williams retreated into private grief, protecting Matilda from a world suddenly eager to turn tragedy into headlines. And Heath's parents, halfway across the world, boarded a plane toward a reality no parent should ever face. He had achieved everything he dreamed of: acclaim, wealth, unforgettable roles, a legacy of artistic boldness. Yet what he truly needed, peace, rest, balance, remained just out of reach. In the end, the cost of brilliance was not fame or fortune. It was the quiet, empty space he left behind in the lives of those who loved him. And in that silence, the world finally understood. Greatness always demands a price, and sometimes the price is far too high. Heath Ledger didn't chase immortality. He built it, quietly, instinctively, one role, one risk, one fearless leap at a time. And when he was gone, the legacy he left behind did something rare. It united an industry known for rivalry, ego, and noise. For a moment, Hollywood fell completely silent, not out of shock, but out of reverence. The kind of reverence reserved for artists whose impact can't be measured in trophies or opening week numbers, but in the way their work lingers in the human heart. Financially, his estate was substantial. Millions in film earnings, future royalties from The Dark Knight that continue to flow, real estate holdings, artistic assets, investment ventures he had begun to shape but never finished. But the most striking part of Heath's legacy wasn't the monetary wealth. It was the decision he never formally wrote. Everything was for Matilda. Because Heath never updated his will after becoming a father, the situation could have spiraled into legal chaos. But instead, something rare happened. His family, every member, chose honor over entitlement. They publicly announced that all of Heath's fortune, all royalties, all future earnings would belong entirely to Matilda Rose Ledger. Not a portion, not a negotiation, everything. Hollywood had seen families torn apart by less, but Heath's family chose unity. They chose love. And that single gesture turned his legacy into something purer, something almost sacred, a father's final gift to his daughter. But the material legacy is only the surface. His performances continue to ripple through film schools, acting workshops, and artistic communities around the world. Young actors study his restraint, his courage, his devotion to truth. Directors still reference his work to explain what emotional authenticity looks like. His Joker, unsettling and unforgettable, remains the benchmark for villainy. A performance so alive it changed the direction of an entire genre. And then there is the quiet legacy, the one his friends still speak about. Heath's generosity. His habit of showing up unexpectedly with a camera to help a friend shoot a short film. His late-night conversations about art and purpose. His belief that creativity should never be guarded, that craft should be shared. He supported young filmmakers, mentored musicians, collaborated with painters and writers. His mind never rested, but it always reached outward. What he left behind wasn't just wealth, it was a blueprint of curiosity, of courage, of relentless exploration. He proved that art isn't about perfection, it's about honesty. It's about cracking open the soul just enough for someone else to feel seen. Even now, years later, when fans write messages at memorials, when actors mention his name in interviews, when audiences rewatch his films late at night, the emotion is always the same: gratitude. Gratitude that someone like Heath Ledger existed. Gratitude that he left behind work that feels eternal. Gratitude that even in his brief life, he added something rare and luminous to the world. His legacy is not the silence of his absence, but the light that continues to rise from everything he created. Legacies rarely end with the final breath. Some drift, some dim, some disappear. But some, very few, continue to glow like a quiet ember that refuses to die. Heath Ledger's legacy lives in that rare place. It lingers not in the tragedy of his final night, but in the vivid, breathtaking life he poured into every frame he ever touched. There is a symmetry to his story that feels almost cinematic. A boy from Perth who conquered the world, a man who gave everything to his craft, a father whose final gift became the safeguard of his daughter's future. The arc of his life bends like a film reel, beginning in sunlight, rising in fire, and ending in a silence that still hums with meaning. In the years since his passing, his work has not faded the way time usually demands. Instead, it has grown, studied, celebrated, revisited, whispered about in classrooms and late-night conversations among aspiring artists. His Joker still chills. His Ennis Del Mar still breaks hearts. Even his unfinished projects feel like doors left open, reminders of the brilliance that might have been. And yet, what remains strongest is not the sorrow of loss, but the tenderness of memory. The way people who knew him speak, softly, carefully, as if holding something fragile. The way fans describe how his performances help them feel less alone. The way his daughter carries his face in her smile. The unmistakable shape of him living on. From silence he rose, and in silence he left behind a legacy that will never fade. Because some lives end, but some legacies continue to breathe, long after the world stops turning.